It's a fan, peace and blessing. This is Derric Rau Khu, and I wanted to make a short video about working with spirit guides. I basically got kicked out of the living room and everything, mainly because my wife and my family, they decided they want to go ahead and have a pajama party. So I mean, I'm hiding out in one of the rooms, and hiding out where the library and stuff is at. So kind of excuse the mess, all right? But I wanted to go ahead, like I said, I wanted to make a short video on working with your spirit guides. And I remember the first time I went ahead and I set up an ancestor altar. I didn't know too much about ancestors. I didn't know too much about spirit guides. I didn't know how they influence you or any of that. In fact, when I was coming into this, when I first started off in this and I set up an ancestor altar, it was in one part, it was out of curiosity. In another part, it was kind of like, let me see how this works, if this is magical or not. Okay, so it was all curiosity, but it dealt with a different kind of curiosity. And I remember, now you hear people going here and they're saying, okay, well, I don't want to say now, but you hear people say that, well, you don't put an ancestor altar up in your bedroom. I hear people say that all the time. And the first time I went ahead and I set up my ancestor altar, it was in my dorm room. And my dorm room was not like these dorm rooms I see now online at a lot of these HBCUs. At the HBCU at Prairie View, the dorm room we had was a little one room, and it was a sink, a vanity, and your bed. There was a closet space, So a lot of times people go in here and they have a lot of these rules in regards to what you can't do, what you cannot do, and all that kind of stuff. And to be honest with you, I found that the ancestors, they just really want you to open up communication with them. Yeah, you probably shouldn't have your ancestor altar in your bedroom, but if that's the only place you can have it, then put it there, place it there. If you have to, cover it with a white cloth when you're not communicating with them. But don't just set up don't just not set up an ancestor altar because, I just have this one bedroom and people said don't do that. No, don't do that. Okay, go ahead and set up the ancestor altar. And if the ancestors see fit, if they see it's necessary, okay, just tell them, hey, I need a bigger space. If you don't want me setting you up in the bedroom or whatever the case is, hey, you need to help me to provide or help me to obtain a bigger space so I can go ahead and I can set up a proper ancestor altar. Okay. So going back to the story, I went ahead and my first ancestor altar was in my dorm room. In fact, it was at the foot of my bed. And I remember, because like I said, I didn't know a whole lot about ancestors. I didn't know anything about spirit guides or any of that. I went ahead and I didn't have any photos because, of course, like I said, I was at my dorm in Texas and from Michigan. So I didn't have any pictures, any photos of any of my actual ancestors, biological ancestors. So it was like, who do I start with? Who do I go ahead and honor? And the first images that came to mind was Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. Now, I went ahead and later on we end up finding out, and this is what we call Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth. All of these individuals, we refer to them as historical ancestors, okay, or historical Aakhu. And it's because they've made such an impact on our lives that it's still, their influence, it still affects us to this day, okay? It's like Harriet Tubman, 300 years, 300 years later, you can still feel her presence. We're still talking about her. We're still talking about her legacy. Same thing with Frederick Douglass. We're still talking about his legacy. Okay, so that's what a historical Aakhu or a historical ancestor is. And if you're starting with a ancestor altar, you don't know where to begin. You don't know who to start with. You don't know how to begin the process. I would recommend putting one of their images up. Put an image of one of those historical ancestors up. And like I said, the historical ancestor I went ahead and I started working with, or I don't want to say working with, but I went ahead and I started honoring was Malcolm X. It was Malcolm X and then Martin Luther King. And the way your spirit guides, they influence you, they'll give you that inspiration. And I remember when I went ahead and I placed, Malcolm's image on my ancestor altar. I went ahead and I can't remember exactly when this took place, but I do recall being inspired. I mean, very strongly inspired to read his autobiography. When the ministers came up here, came to the college to go ahead and speak from the nation in Houston, when they came up, went ahead and listened to them. Okay, went to go see them. But when other lecturers came up, they were talking about anything regarding history. They were talking about anything regarding Kemetic history. Psychology, Dr. Naeem Akbar, when he came to the college and everything. All these different individuals. This was all basically, it was inspired from Malcolm. Okay? And when you read Malcolm's autobiography, you'll find out that Malcolm, he was into a lot of things. He really wanted to understand a lot of things because he was really about trying to improve, the plight of the race. All right? So that same inspiration carried over. Now, it was interesting. It was like after that took place, after I went ahead, I was honoring him and I got that inspiration to do all these things, to read his autobiography, to participate in lectures, or, go see lectures, see different speakers, go ahead and lecture, participate in, quote unquote, conscious groups and, organizations that were around the campus. After I went ahead and I did all that, it was like I could feel his presence and it felt like he was part of my consciousness. But it was like when it came to honoring him, it was like somehow his image, his picture, it just fell off. It just fell. And it was almost, in a sense, the way I interpret it was that it was like basically saying, okay, you've learned all I can teach you. Time to move on. All right. And that's pretty much, from that understanding that relationship, that's pretty much how I know that how spirit guides, how they work with you. Now, and every time I've gone ahead and I've worked with any of my spirit guides, that's pretty much, like I said, I always get inspiration from them. In fact, while on the subject, if you are kind of lacking in your intuition, you're not sure if a spirit guide is communicating with you or not, you need to check out the video before you set up an ancestor altar. It'll kind of give you an idea, of how to determine when your spirit guide, your ancestors, when they're speaking to you and when they're not. Okay? But every time a spirit guide, every time, from my experience, every time a spirit guide shares or wants to, you're working with them, they will give you inspiration. They will give you, they'll give you stories. I'll never forget. One time I learned about Black Hawk, And I remember I kept seeing all this information about Black Hawk. You know, you talk to most people, they'll tell you, oh yeah, you're supposed to take this, this indigenous or Native American head or bust, and you put it inside a bucket and all that. Well, when I did that, it didn't work. Okay. In fact, it was like that. It sat there for a while, and it did not work. There was like no connection. There was nothing. And I can't remember how long it actually took, but it was I would almost say I went ahead and I didn't have a bust, but I had I did have like a Native American figurine, and he was in a squatting position. I've shown it in previous videos, and I remember I placed this figurine. I basically just kept honoring, and that was it. And then all of a sudden, I got a story, and the story was. And when I'm saying I got this story, it was like something came to my head. It was like this whole idea came to my head that there was this Native American that was kind of like, that slave taskers or slave masters, they went ahead and they came upon in in the bush or in a swamp, actually. That's where I remember it. And in the swamp, they come across this Native American and they're asking, which way did these runaway slaves go? And this Native American basically pointed me in the wrong direction. And then after the slave taskers, after they went ahead, the oppressors or whatever, after they went ahead and they went in the wrong direction, they go off a little distance or so. Then, excuse me, that one Native American will go ahead and tell the runaways, hey, okay, y'all can go that way now. I've already sent them this way. Now, that was a story that this one Native American, one of my Native American spirit guides, shared with me. And after they shared that with me, it built a rapport. Then I was able to go ahead and I was able to, honor that Native American spirit on my ancestor altar. I learned right then and there, that wasn't Black Hawk. However, we all have like a Black Hawk spirit guide within our lineage, okay? So those of you who, if you have this connection with a Native American spirit guide and that resonates with you, that's how it works, okay? Now, keep in mind, as I stated before, I tried doing what other people have done in regards to, put Black Hawk in the bucket and all that kind of stuff. I tried that, but that's not what this spirit wanted. My Black Hawk was like, no, that's not what I don't want that. In fact, like I said, it took about a month. Excuse me, it took like a month or so for him to even go ahead and communicate, for him to even go ahead and speak, okay? And then once he spoke, that's when he told me the story. And then after he told me the story, that's when I had a connection, okay? Now, a lot of times when people go in here and they talk about spirit guides and everything, they always go in and give this positive, these real encouraging words, and they make it seem like everything is always, always peachy. It's not the case, all right? I remember I went ahead one time when I was, again, didn't know too much about spirit guides or anything. And I'm just going ahead and not really dibbling and dabbling, but I'm trying to understand it. And the best way I can understand something is by I learn all the information I can, and then I go ahead and I plunge in, okay? And I remember the auntie, I think Aunt Carolyn died, okay? Now you see images of her. People they say, oh, she is she's one of the godmothers of the Hoodoo tradition and all that. Well, I remember one time I tried to go in here and I tried to honor her. And I can't tell you exactly when, But I can tell you, it was like shortly after I got like the biggest headache. I mean, it was like big time migraine headache. All right. Now, I interpreted it that two ways. Or one or two ways. I interpreted it as one, she didn't want to work with me, and my ancestors didn't want to work with her. That's one interpretation. The second interpretation was that basically she was on a different level, and I needed to be on another level. Now, if you've seen the previous video I talked about last week, or a couple of weeks ago, in which I was saying how I found out what Hoodoo is, what really Hoodoo is in comparison to conjuring root work, then it kind of makes sense in regards to why I was always having problems when I tried to go ahead and deal with that, the spirit Aunt Caroline died. She was a true Hoodoo practitioner. My ancestors were not, and they were not about that. From my ancestors' perspective, she was a witch. She might have been, she was knowledgeable about a whole lot of things, but for the most part, she was a witch. Okay, that's how they interpret it. And that's the reason why maybe, like I said, I got a headache like that. So needless to say, went ahead and checked her picture off of there, and that was it. And never honored her or any of that kind of stuff. In fact, whenever I see her picture on the internet, kind of acknowledge her and move on. Okay. And that's not the first time that's happened. That's happened with a couple of individuals, I would say historical individuals, in which I go in and I put them on the ancestor altar. Excuse me, put them on the ancestor altar. And we have a connection. We have have problems. We have a headache or so, and there's no connection. And that's pretty much how it happens. So the thing about the spirituality is that it's always trial and error. And that being said, speaking of that, there's a couple of people that have gone ahead and they've contacted me, and they're like, hey, can you tell me do this? Can you tell me when I need to do this and all this other kind of stuff? And remember, spirituality is not about me sitting on some high table and dictating, this is what you ought to do. This is what you ought to do. That's not what this is about. That's not what Kemetic spirituality is about. That's not what Afro-diasporic spirituality is about. If you're into that, you're looking for a religion, and that's not what this is, okay? Spirituality is about you going ahead and figuring out what works with you, what works best for you in order for you to go ahead and fulfill your destiny and your purpose in life before you leave here, okay? So your ancestors and spirit guides, your Aakhu, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to go ahead and help you to fulfill your destiny. And not all of the spirit guides that you meet are going to be there to assist you or are supposed to assist you. Okay? Like I said, Aunt Caroline died. Went ahead and I tried to work with her and got the biggest headache. And again, that's happened with a few other, individuals, historical individuals. Tried to go ahead and work with them, and it was no haps. Okay. So you kind of got to go ahead, you got to look at it from that perspective. Are they there to help me? Are they not there to help me? And how do I build a rapport? Once you go ahead and you look at it from that perspective, put them on the ancestor altar, you've learned everything which you can learn from, from a book in regards to that, spirit. Try to go ahead and build a rapport. And if you, like I said, if you get a story, if you get an inspiration or any of that, then they're working with you. If you don't get that, if you don't get any inspiration, If you, like I said, you get a headache. For me, it was a headache. And that was, like I said, that's more than one occasion. But for other people, they might end up seeing a vision, or you might be seeing something else. Check out, again, what your different, or what's your strong intuitive sense is. And get in tune with it. Find out what it is so that you can go ahead and you can see if a guide is going to work with you, or a guide is not going to work with you, how they're going to communicate to you. Okay? I think that's pretty much it. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, as always, feel free to drop me a line. Until next time, it's Pooh Fam. Peace.